Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Ahmedabad Book Club. I am Dr. Shashikant Bhagat, the host of this evening program. And we all know that the entire country, the entire world is locked down. We are doing everything at home, from pray to pranayam, from reading to singing, everything we are doing at home. Because the situation is like this only, unprecedented, phenomena that is happening around us. And we always try to bring some good precedented things before you to read, to understand, to you know uh, see yourself. And today we have with us a very distinguished author with us, Kavita Kane. Madam, welcome to this program, this Facebook live program. Friends, I like to brief the author. Kavita Khan is the best-selling author of the 6 books, all based on Indian mythology. A senior journalist with a career of over 2 decades, she quit her job to write the book on Indian mythology. With a postgraduate degree in English literature and journalism and mass communication from the University of Pune, the only skill she has, she confesses, is writing. And born in Mumbai with a childhood spent large in Patna and Delhi, and she lived in Pune. So this is a small brief I have, but two things that coming out from this small introduction to our guest, that is, she has the amalgamation of journalism as well as the mythology. So journalists always think, always write. So over 2 decades of the experience in writing has accumulated the entire experience and put the thought, okay, this is okay now. I have spent 2 decades in the journalism. I've given so much of story to the society to pursue. Now it's time to write something on the mythology. Madam, once again, welcome to this forum. Let
Hello,
begin with
everyone.
let begin with the question that is, why journalism, you know, and how you spent your time in the journalism. 2 decades of the time is not the small one. And what was your experience?
Uh, journalism was a natural step because I always wanted to write, and the journalism was a different type of writing. And the best part about journalism is you meet. It's not only about writing. It's the human interest. It's the fact that you meet so many people, different type of people.
I think we lost the connection. I guess because our voice is not coming over from my end. I think we lost you in the connection.
Yeah. Hi again.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I think okay,
It's a technical
okay, yeah,
disruption. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. The glitch has to be there.
Yes,
So
yes.
coming back to your question, I think the journalism. I think the best part was meeting, not you're tackling different topics, but more than that, I think it's the people who you meet and the experience you get on field. I think, and that whole. I think by the time I finished, I was the features editor at Pune Mirror, and eventually I decided it is better. After 20 years, I think I found it more. Uh, it was a new field. I wanted to. Karna's wife had become a success, and it was either or. So I said, I decided to become a full-time author, and that's how from journalism I shifted to novel writing. But yes, here I would like to add that how me being a journalist really helped. It helps me in a research. It's a very systematic way, because even while when you're when even you're doing the smallest of articles, the thing is that the research has to be there. You have to know about the person whom you're going to interview, or the topic you're going to write on, or whatever the episode is happening. So I think the research was swifter, more efficient, more streamlined. Secondly, I think this technicality of words, editing. I think editing, it helped me a lot while editing my books. I remember my first book I had written about 1.5 lakh words, and the publisher told me, no, you have to bring it down to 1 lakh, and I think I gave that within a week, and they were very
Wow,
surprised. I said,
great.
no, yeah, I said, "Well, yeah, we are used to it. So we don't. At least I don't think I have a affection too much of uh, bonding with my words, that I feel very scared, or I feel very lost that I'm cutting down on my words. No, I think that sort of a connect. I try to be a little aloof with that. And this sort of the journalistic, you don't realize, but unconsciously the journalist in you is always there. Once upon a time, yes, journalism was fair and objective. So I think I try to be as fair and objective as I can, in even while sort of sketching out my stories, sketching out the character. How I'm sort of each of them. It's not just the protagonist I'm talking about. It's all the characters, and trying to bring a more fair and objective uh, vantage point is very very necessary, because I think mythology is basically on that. Mythology wants us to be fair and objective, because it's not a moral science lesson. It is more
Correct. I mean,
on it's supposed to make you think, not be moralistic and not be judgmental. So I think that whole thing of journalism and mythology as a genre just suited me well enough, and I hope I'm doing well, and I'm
yes,
telling the
I mean,
stories well.
after giving up this journalistic career, and you thought that let me go and write some book, and you went up to, writing a 6 books on the Indian mythology. So, can you just little bit of explain what all the 6 books related to which character, which Indian mythology that you have picked up and
Um,
giving to the readers to read?
Of course, I've stuck primarily to the epics, Ramayana and the Mahabharata. The first one was Karna's wife, which was the story of Karna. He's not telling a story. I've tried to tell his story through the eyes of his wife, because I wanted a woman's point of view about a man who is extremely controversial. Uh, he's dark, he's grey, he's noble, uh, but he's almost an anti-hero also. From so the whole. I was not trying to make him. There was no question of. Uh, Glorifying him. There was no exactly, the whole idea was not to glorify him, rather humanize him. And I think the best person to see him for what he was would have been his wife or his mother. And I selected his wife because the wife has a wider range and wider opportunities for her to mingle with certain stratas of society, with the royal intrigue. And for that, I had to create a fictitious character. Urvi, the protagonist, is a fictitious character, though Karna had wife. And and I think the success of Karna's wife actually gave me the courage to go back to Urmila, whom I had really originally wanted to write the first book about. So Urmila again was, I think, is one of the most neglected, she's the most overlooked characters in the
Yes,
Ramayana.
yes, yes, yes. Correct.
And not only her, what was life in the palace after Ram, Lakshman, and Sita left. So this whole she as a character, and as well as the fact that uh, what was it that happened in Ayodhya after they left. I think that both of them made me sort of, it was it was a mystery to me. So I wanted to solve my own mystery, and I decided to write Sita's sister. And the fact that again there were 4 sisters. This whole thing of
Correct.
I love. We are sisters because we are 3 sisters. I have daughter. There are a lot of girl cousins. So I know what a girl's family is. So uh, that, I think, in a way, I sort of unconsciously did portray it in Sita's sister. And more than that, I think we never realized the fact that Ramayana is also about sisterhood. It's not only about the brotherhood of the four
Correct,
brothers,
correct, correct, correct.
or the other four. There are group of brothers. There is Ravan, Kumbhakarna, and
Women
Vibhishan
empowerment is
also,
certain.
and then Vali. Yeah, so you see a lot of brothers in Ramayana, but we never see the sisters. And I think Sita's sister was also an attempt to show that the sisterhood in Ramayana is such a subtle subtext in the whole epic, because through Sita, when she meets different women, you realize, so she creates a certain bond with each one of them, and that is sisterhood. It's not just about blood relation. It's the sisterhood between two women, the bonding, the mutual respect, and that, I think, the sisterhood is what actually empowers a woman, because uh, in times of low, in times in certain, it is that is exactly what the story of Sita is about. Who are the people who actually help her? It's these women, and
Correct.
right from her sisters till eventually to Mandodari, or even, of course, she never meets Ahilya, but uh, all these women, whether it's Trijata, Mandodari, her two cousins and a sister, and other different rishis' wives which she meets during the exile, all of them help her evolve her as the person she becomes. She becomes stronger. She sees a different world. The world which she sees is through these people's eyes, and they help her. They support her, and that bonding is sort of inherent. It is also very, very, it's not visible. It's very, but it is strong, and that I think, therein lies the beauty of the sisterhood of the Ramayana. We don't see it, but it is so much there. I mean, the story of Sita is the story of sisterhood. So I think
Correct.
Sita's sister was essentially on that. And the third book was a little different, on Menka, where for the first time I sort of moved into a little grey shade, because Menka again is an Apsara. We sort of see her again in a very conventional image of she being an Apsara. She's the seductress. She sort of seduces a powerful rishi, and then sort of ruins him. But that's not her story. Menka is much more than that, and I think that's what I wanted to show. Where Menka, whom we see, like she's sort of a symbol of female sexuality, and how she uses this as a weapon. She's part of a personality, and how she uses it as a weapon to. It's almost like a weapon of destruction. She destroys the man she's assigned to destroy, and eventually falls in love with him, and the repercussions she has, and on the man she loves. So the story about Vishwamitra and Menka is just not about love and lust. It's also about sacrifice. So I think that is what I really wanted to show, where we never associate apsaras and sacrifice at all, because that is again a very stereotypical image we have of an apsara, that she's beautiful, selfish, and they do their job and they go away from the scene. But in apsara, if you see all the apsara, they have very sad stories, tragic stories around them. So it's not just about Menka. You say the story of Urvashi or Tilotama, all of them. So each one has a very dramatic, tragic story connected with her, and we don't see Apsaras beyond all that. So I think it was my little tribute for Apsaras. We see Apsaras, or I mean, you go to any temple, you enter the temple and the Apsaras are there. So I think it was a different feel. I moved into a lot of grays,
And it's a
and then
very it's a very important. Yeah. It's a very
and
important
eventually
to
I
give
think.
the.
Mhm.
It's very important to give the women empowerment in the Indian mythology, because mostly if you read any of the Indian mythology, so mostly the story is more depicted on the male side compared to the female side, right?
Yes, we do. Because we have seen, I think we have seen mythology, the entire discourse which we have been having on mythology, on the epics, is primarily through the men's side. Because it was written by men, it was told and retold by men. So, and immediately the figures the images which we see about when we talk about the epics is always the men. The two women we think of as Draupadi and Sita, but there are a lot of women besides them. So I think these are the women I tried to highlight. So I think by the time I did my fourth book, from white to gray, and I actually moved into the dark, where I tried to tell the story of female antagonist, Surpanaka, and she is also a very extremely paradoxical figure because uh, she's shown as a very ugly person and physically a ugly person, and she has a beautiful name called Minakshi, and that is how,
Yes, yes.
that whole paradox about how from Minakshi she actually became a Surpanaka. So that was my story, and while telling the story, I was not interested in sort of making her a saint or making her a sinner. Again, as I said, I didn't want to be judgmental at all. I was intrigued by the story because I think because without her, I think Ramayana, the second part of Ramayana would not have happened. I mean, she is the reason why Ram and Ravan meet, and I think you can. She's one of the reasons why the war happens, and I think Surpanaka's story, again, she has been demonized a lot, and I was trying to just humanize her, try to see her as a woman, not as a demon, not as a princess, not as anyone else. Again, not as a stereotype. I think I wanted to remove that. And the fifth book was Satyavati, which was again completely on royal intrigue, where I think Satyavati, as a political head, as a person, a girl who from a fisher girl she moves, eventually becomes the queen of Hastinapur, and how she becomes that. And everyone knows the story of Satyavati. She's there for a very, very long time. I mean, chronologically, she's there for a long time, but we never realize the impact. And I think she is also one of the most underrated characters because I think she was actually one of the most powerful women in the Mahabharata, where she wielded power herself. It's not that she sort of yearned for that power, she snatched that power and she wielded it. So she was one of the most political persons, and we see politics everywhere, and we see women politicians, and
Yes,
I think this
correct,
whole
correct,
thing of
correct.
and you see Satyavati, and I think Satyavati was the one who who sort of her certain decisions, her certain choice, uh, and her that led to a certain a lot of events which, even if she didn't have to face, definitely her grandchildren and the later generation had to face, and eventually led to the a bloody war at the Kurukshetra. So how one is responsible eventually, she has to face that, how she was responsible for her decision, and that is she learns it in a very harsh way. So I think that is exactly the story of Satyavati. And the last, of course, was Ahilya, the sixth book.
Yes,
We are talking about
we are coming.
Ahilya.
Yes, the whole discussion is going to be on.
I think you have a lot of questions on that. So I think let's start that. I think I won't explain. I won't waste time on
So,
explaining
so,
Ahilya.
so before going in deep into the main topic, the main character. So let me announce to all the viewers that this forum is open to your valuable questions, your valuable input, valuable feedbacks. So keep posting your questions, keep posting your query, keep asking your doubts, your understanding to the author. So let's create this engagement this way. So let me begin the sixth book that we are going to talk about, Ahilya, right?
Hmm.
So what we have seen through different mythology, that the women have seduced in some or different way, right? So
Hmm.
how
Hmm.
you saw the character of Ahilya and the wife of Gautam Rishi, because somehow or other way it was politically portrayed in a different way, seduced in a different way. Somebody has
Yeah.
given a schematic view that the wife of Indra and something like that. So how the whole character of Ahilya you narrated in your book, and give the brief about your book.
The brief is, of course, the story of Ahilya. She is the wife of Gautam Rishi, and mm, she is seduced by Indra, and for which she is cursed by Gautam, and she is turned into a rock, and she gets back a human form when Ram, Ram, when Ram
Touch the
comes to the forest. So this is the
yes.
rough story, very basic story. I tried to take the story. Um, I tried to stick to Valmiki's Ahilya, where she actually mm, uh, see what has happened is through the ages. I mean, when you actually see, there are so many versions of the Ahilya story, this little episode. And by the end of it, you really don't know, as you said correctly, you really don't know what actually happened. So, but I stuck to Valmiki's Ahilya, where
Narration.
the whole mystery is whether she was seduced, whether she was forcibly, she was tricked, whether it was she was forcibly seduced by Indra. Uh, the whole thing was, I think, hinged on the fact that she she knew it was seduction by subterfuge, but she recognized Indra and she went ahead with it. I think that is what Valmiki was trying to say was, she went and she went ahead with that decision. You may call it a moment of weakness. It was a decision, it was a choice, whatever it was. And I think the whole story hinges on that, that she went ahead. I think for me that was the most important part. I definitely do not as I said, I stuck to the original, and that is what actually makes Ahilya the mystery, the paradox, and the woman of strength she is, because uh, she uh, she knew what the consequences would be, and she was ready to face them. And I think that is what we talk about strong women. But I think strong is not about strong women or weak women, because I think the moment you say strong, there's the opposite is the weak. I mean, that is the dualism which you always have. But I think with Ahilya, I think she was the most complex character, because that one decision, what happens to her, that whole thing, the whole world is shattered, the whole world is destroyed. She loses the trust between the husband and
Correct.
wife. I mean, it brings
Correct.
a lot of topics. It talks about love and loyalty in marriage. It talks about infidelity in marriage. It talks about even penalty to infidelity. This whole concept, all of them. And after a point, I really didn't want to paint Rishi Gautam as a villain either, because he was not a villain. I mean, we have caricaturized Rishi Gautam, we have caricaturized Ahilya and Indra. Three of them are three extreme, and where Ahilya is not saying anything, she's almost a mute character. And which husband would not be angry if he sees his wife being unfaithful to him? I mean, so he had to be humanized also. She had to be humanized. She had to be so. So this whole thing of Ahilya being the daughter created by Brahma, I think I sort of, that means she's a sort of a personification of perfection. So I tried to humanize her by showing there was a folklore which says that she was a Puru princess, So because I wanted to bring the divinity, there less of divination in her life and more humanity, where humanity, mankind with its flaws. So I wanted us to show her more as a woman, not just as an ideal wife. That whole thing of, we tend to deify everything. That she, from a devoted wife, suddenly she becomes a condemned woman. So two extremes. But how from
Yeah,
a devoted wife, why did she become a
I
condemned woman?
like to pause here. Since
Hmm.
the Ramayana and Mahabharata going in Doordarshan and other uh, channels, right? If you see the 14 years of Rama journey before
Hmm.
fighting the last war with Ravana, right? So the
Hmm.
story actually begin from when he touched the stone and aligned the Ahilya.
Hmm.
Since then, from there, the story keeps forwarding, and then he started taking the blessings of Rishi Muni and
Yeah.
sagas and everything,
Yes.
and
Yes.
taking the Astra Shastra and everything. So the question comes here: why the Rama has liberated? Why the responsibility got to the Rama shoulder to go and liberate the Ahilya, and then you continue your story forward. So, what was your research and
Uh,
narration side? Yeah.
no, in fact, that is exactly in my book. I think I have deliberately kept it was a Ahilya story, so I really did not want to. I did not want Ram to take the center stage here at all, because
Okay.
no, seriously, I really wanted to tell Ahilya's story. As I said, when I wanted to humanize her, the liberation comes from her. She has to realize what her salvation is, what her she is seeking with. She not only seeking within, she's also seeking outside. The whole thing about she turning into a stone, or in the Valmiki Ramayana, she turns through meditation. She turns to air. That is what the story
Correct.
is about, where she goes into a spiritual hibernation. I think that is what where she sort of cuts herself from the world, and she goes introspects. That is what Ahilya is about, and I think that is what I wanted to show more than the divination of Ram, because then again the whole story become different. The very fact that tried to keep her as a woman a woman with flaws, a woman with weaknesses, a woman with her strength, a woman with what do you say, contradictions, certain a lot of complexity, which all of us are. I mean, we are not black and white. We are not good and bad. We have all our. There is a lot of range between the two extremes, and instead of being a very oversimplified embodiment of either a devoted wife or something as villainous as a condemned woman, I think I wanted to show just her as a woman free of all social judgment. That was where a very important part where society plays a role. I think it plays a role in Sita's life, and this episode actually is an echo of what is going to happen to Sita. So I think I sort of took it as a prelude to what is going to happen to Sita. So
So I got
that
one
is why the
question. So I got one question of one of our ABC member, Monica Gupta, Monica Sudhir Gupta. She's asking that mythology being a tricky subject, how much should be imagination and how much relevance to the present times? Is there any
is there any
formula?
form? No, I think here I would say mythology being a tricky subject. I don't think mythology is a tricky subject. I think mythology is exactly about that. Mythology is not a story of the past, of the relics. Mythology has always connected the past with contemporary issues. That is why we have different versions. The versions are a reflection of the changing time and the socio-political situation of that time. So that is why the versions happen. But yes, it is a tricky subject. It depends on how the readers take it. And till now, I think my readers have been very mature and discerning, and they've realized the difference between fiction, what is non-fiction, what is fact, what is falsification. So I think they know the difference, because I always tell my readers, go back to the original story, because as you said, there are so many versions. When you just type Ahilya, you'll find so many stories on Ahilya. That shows that there was a freedom of expression right from A to Z. Because if you find there are 27 version, there was a freedom to express this 27 version. So I don't think mythology is at all so tricky, because I think it is a canvas, it is a genre where it's sort of where it's a platform to place contemporary issues, and sort of revisit the characters, reinterpret the characters, revisit the situation and revision it, and still the plot remains the same, but the narrative changes because the perspective changes. So I think here I think mythology is the most liberal genre I can find.
Right, when the Ahilya characters come, and there is another understanding, there is another narration is there on mythology, says that Ahilya was equally attracted by the Devas and Asuras, right? And then the Indra has what we call said that no, she is my wife, not to the Asuras. So is this understanding is really pragmatic, and what do you see? I mean,
See, the whole thing was from what the story says that is actually talking about wisdom. It's saying when there's a swayamvar, and the person who is the fastest to go around the world wins her hand. And Indra, he goes around all the three worlds, but it is Gautam who wins her, because uh, and eventually marries her. Now here again, I think that's what I try to say in my book, where she actually has a say in a swayamvar, because this whole concept of mm, here you're not asking Ahilya whether she wants to marry Indra or whether she wants to marry a Gautam Rishi. So there, I
uh,
think, as you say, there again, I'm
yeah,
trying to
yeah,
say, I'm coming back to the first question, where she's saying how much of imagination. There, I've used my imagination, where I've tried to show her choice, and it was her decision to marry Gautam Rishi. So the story, that's why, and these sort of, I think, especially in the epics and the Puran, these stories are not to be taken literally. I think there is a lot of layering, there's a lot of symbolism, there's a lot of metaphors, and I think that is exactly what. I mean, if you see the story of Indra, what Indra means, what Ahilya means, and what the Gautam means, I think three of them, if you take it symbolically, I think they are interconnected. The whole, if
okay.
Ahilya means, if Ahilya sort of means a plow, So and Gautam is she's almost like a barren land and which needs to be plowed. So there is a lot of, I mean, these sort of interpolations are always there. And I think the whole story is very interesting. It is this talking, of course, it's talking about a extramarital affair, but it is talking about it without being judgmental. I think that is what I liked about Valmiki. Ahilya was, you are not supposed to be judgmental. I mean, Gautam in his own right is an angry husband. So each one in their own way, there is a certain point of view, and I decided to take Ahilya's point of view. So that was my, because I think she's an extremely mute character where she's almost voiceless, and you really don't hear whether she wants to explain herself, she wants to justify herself, and she's not just given a chance because she's sort of silenced because of the cause, because of social condemnation, and she remains silent all her life. I mean, really don't see her voice at all in the narrative.
I think there was a big disagreement or a fight happened between Ahilya and the Gautam Rishi related to the birth of children, right?
Ha ha.
So
Okay, can you no, no, like expand on the
I mean,
original?
yeah,
One of
yeah,
the
Police,
I can't hear you. You're
I
breaking.
think
I can't hear.
yes, due to this network problem. My question was, this was a little bit of conflict happened between the Gautam Rishi and the Indira's related to the children because Ahilya gave a birth of two children. So there was a myth,
Hmm.
there was a misunderstanding between Indra and Gautam Rishi, and then the some conflict happened, and then the Gautam Rishi has left Ahilya and caused something like this. I
No, no,
mean,
no. That no. That is the story of Brihaspati, Tara, and Chandra you are talking about. It is not about
okay,
these three at all. The story
okay.
which you are talking about is Tara and Brihaspati and Chandra, where Tara
But
leaves. Tara is the wife
something
of
is
Brihaspati.
some,
Yeah.
something is there with the same character, Ahilya.
No,
Some
no,
kind
no,
of
no.
a
It's
story.
not with
Okay.
Ahilya. Ahilya, all her children were Gautam children. There was no, she didn't have any child from Indra. But
Okay.
there are a lot of other stories. You know, if you see all these stories, the folklore and the stories, later stories in the Puran, the Gautam Rishi and Ahilya story always they are always there. They are different versions. So connecting them, the one which I wanted to sort of tell and sort of joining the dots and telling a rational story, that was what I was trying to do. And coming back to your question, the story which you are referring to is completely different. It is not so there was no controversy about children as such. Whatever the children she had were from Gautam, so there was no. Here it was about it was an individual clash where it was about Gautam, Indra, and Ahila. That is the triangle. There is no the children part. I think that is also a very interesting. See, in fact, that is the beauty of our epics. You have this story, and in contrast, you have a story of a Rishi Brihaspati whose wife Tara leaves Brihaspati and goes to Chandra, which is again the whole. There is a symbolic between the relationship between Chandra, the moon, and Tara, and they have a child called Budh. And the controversy was whose
Hmm.
child is Budh? Is he Chandra's child or is he Brihaspati's child? And
Correct.
Budh is
Yes.
actually not here. So he is known as
Yeah.
Brihaspati because he is the father. He is the father and he is married to. So because when Tara goes back to Brihaspati, she goes with a child and he accepts the child as his. So that is the story. So they have these two stories of infidelity running. They are almost contrast, and it actually shows. There is no judgment here. It is a question between the three people involved and how you react and how you respond to situations, and accordingly you have to face the consequences. So
Now
see, now you are
coming
giving
back.
me two. They are two. These are two examples, and I think I will tell the readers read both these instances and come to your own conclusions.
Okay, coming back to the book, right? Uh, how many chapters are there in the book, and any of the chapter or any of two or three chapters that interesting would like to give attention to all of us, to all the viewers, that if you read my book, then
I think
must read
I
to.
don't have my book right now. I don't have my book right now, but uh, I think there will be roughly my books usually have 23 to 25 chapters. So, but I think my personal favorite was the epilogue between uh, between the conversation between Sita and Ahilya. Of course, it's completely fictional. If Sita had met Ahilya, what would the conversation be? And it's a story about two women who were sort of condemned by society, and how they were condemned by the women, condemned by the husband. And I think it's a story. I think that is my favorite piece. So I definitely. But then again, I would not advise you to read, because that is almost the end, the last part of the novel. So I definitely not like anyone to read the last part. You start with the first, and then gradually proceed further.
Now, there is another demand of the reader mostly. So, in the contemporary time, in the present time, when you read any mythology character, any epic character, and you connect with the character in the present context, so what insights that Ahilya characters gives to all of us in the present time?
The lesson, I think, the first lesson is that you do not judge. That is, I think, that the story is not about just loyalty and infidelity. In fact, I'm not endorsing infidelity, nor am I making her a victim. Her story was that she was judged. And who are we as society to judge her? Because we still do that. It's so easy pointing fingers, shaming another person without knowing what that person has gone through. So I think it is a question of being more empathetic. I think that is what is needed. And I think that was the story of Ahilya, where she was, if you say she sinned, then I think the punishment really was too severe for that sin, if you really want to see it that way. And was it this whole thing about sin and sinning and sinners? I think the whole crux lies. I think it is like the bond is held by the society itself, where they have made the rules and they break the rules and they twist the rules as they wanted, and uh, sort of pass the judgment, and the person is supposed to the victim is supposed to suffer the punishment or the penalty without any protest. So I think Ahilya's story is very much relevant in today's time, because we are talking about love and marriage and loyalty, marriage and infidelity, uh, unfaithfulness, and more than that, I think this condemnation. I think this whole my whole point of argument is always the judgment part, because I think we are very harsh on other people. No one is perfect. I mean, everyone is going to slip and make mistakes. Give that other person a chance. I think the society never allowed even Gautam Rishi to give her a chance. That whole thing was whether she did the whole thing. It is not on whether she did it or not. Of course she did it. She admits to it. She's caught doing it. The thing is, do we give a person who has slipped or who has got his moment of weakness, do you give that person a chance? And who are we to give them a chance? That is why are we sitting on having this entire on a higher moral ground and passing judgment? I think that is where my whole argument was, that I think if she had that made her decision, let her decide for herself, let her lead her life, and with the people involved in it. So I think it was completely a husband wife relation problem, which was the whole thing, everyone got involved in it. So Ahilya becomes sort of a symbol. The why she deified, I mean, she becomes a symbol of sacrifice for that. From a devoted wife, she becomes the adulteress. So why do you that whole, are we even really sensitive enough to realize why she became an adulteress? So I think I was more interested in the why than how.
Right. Women is also known for a nice hospitality, nice care, nice care. I mean, do you see the Ahilya character in terms of giving the respect and welcome and hospitality in her character?
Yes, of course, she's looking after the entire ashram. She's like a mother. If she's the guru, she's the wife. So she has the respect. She's known for her. She has her 4 children. She's looking after the ashram. So I think she's definitely a guru's wife. A rishi's wife are equally revered. I mean, you see any rishi, Vashishta, Arundhati, they are pairs. They are ideal pairs. Agastya and Lok Mudra, all of them, Rishi, if there was a Rishi, there was always a Rishika. So I think we fail to see the wife part of it. It's on so I think she had to be as noble and about, I would not say virtuous, but definitely wise and an extremely sagacious sort of a person herself to marry such a man. So I think definitely the wives, all the rishis' wives, the they were revered. They were revered. They were the mother. They were the mother of an entire ashram, and it was not an ashram. It
Correct.
was the center of learning, the center of spiritualism. It was a center of I think I've said in that book the whole incident about Ahilya, about Gautam and Jabali, where he accepts a boy, and the first question they ask is, who is your father? And he says, no, I don't know who the father is because the mother doesn't know, and he's a prostitute's son. And Gautam accepts him in his ashram. So it is talks about a certain democracy, a certain liberalism, and
Correct.
there was no discrimination. Gautam was such a high-minded person, a man with a very extremely high evolved soul himself, and he took everyone in it. So it is the story of such a man. So that is exactly what I'm trying to say. I have not painted Gautam as a villain either. He is not the villain. If he has cursed, there is a certain, the curse is again, we are talking about, the whole thing has sort of become very dramatic. That's what I said. They have all, the three of them have become very caricaturized figure. He's the old angry husband, Rishi, who curses his wife. She becomes a rock, and Indra is sort of an extremely licentious person. So these three, I think they needed more to be understood than just the three unpleasant extremities.
While writing the book, any point of time you thought that while searching the different facets of Ahilya, that this incident or this situation made you think in a very deep way why this was happened? What was the reason? I mean, any point of time or any situation that made you think deeply to go and search about the that particular incident related to the Ahilya, that made you
No, I
ponder,
didn't
made you.
understand the question.
The
Oh,
question
I didn't
was,
understand the question.
question here is, any point of time that you think that this situation was very different. I need to understand from the different perspective.
Yes, the very fact that they are different versions, they have been taken this different perspective. This was my perspective of a situation where, as I said earlier, the whole thing was, I think I wanted to show her as a free woman, free because we are talking. It was earlier was basically a woman of desire, and we tend to confuse desire with sexual desire because she is a girl who has hopes and ambition and desires, and she's trying to realize it. So the whole title of Ahilya's Awakening is not only she's associated with a certain sexuality, but it's not just a sexual desire. It's talking also about uh, besides her right to her sexual desires, of course, it is also her right to about other desires. So I think here it is about all her desires being sort of crushed in some way or the other. So the
So,
last of it was the episode. I think that is why this episode happens last in my novel, where you have shown from how Ahilya, the princess, she becomes a Rishi's wife, and her entire journey, where she has her personal hopes, her personal desires, her personal ambition, and how they are not realized. So it is a question of disappointment and hurt, and that is why the complexity of Ahilya's character comes from there. So at one point I said yes, definitely at one. As I said, I'm not endorsing. Definitely for me, it was as an author, it was extremely difficult because I did not want to take a stand. I definitely will not endorse infidelity. I will not endorse cheating. Nor will I endorse. The whole system of being a punishment and a victim. So these are the two extremes which we have, which was there in the case, and I had to take a certain stance, and that was the perspective I had selected, and that is how I told her story.
we're getting a one question from Parul Malviya. She's saying that, good evening, sir and madam. Ahilya, as you said, became an adulteress. She was judged for an act of infidelity, but then she is also one of the
Also,
Panchkanyas.
the Panchakanya. Can you throw some
Can you
light
throw
on?
some light
So
on
that is
that?
exactly,
Yeah.
yes, that is the paradox here. That is exactly the paradox here, because uh, by deifying her, by making her Panchakanya, we are sort of that is what that whole extremity of from a devoted wife to a adulteress and again to a devoted wife. I think this whole what do you say, not even a
Narrative.
journey, that whole uh, no, the whole expanse of it, if you actually the whole curve is it actually shows the, I mean, I'm trying to take in an extremely humanistic I'm not trying to take see it in patriarchal angle at all. I'm trying to, because patriarchal angle is this, that the moment you deify a person, a sin person, you or you forgive and you deify the person, she becomes, no, it doesn't work that way. That is a typical patriarchal way of saying it. I will for me it was a woman, that is what I was trying. She seeks her own salvation, she seeks her own liberation, and from there she becomes a Panchkanya, because she becomes a Panchkanya because she rises from the ordinary to the extraordinary by suffering, by enduring what she has enduring for her decisions. I think that makes her a noble person, that makes her a stronger person, that makes her an extraordinary person. So she is definitely deserves to be the, she's one of the first Panchakanyas. So the her identity, her story is sort of a reminder, is sort of, it's not a reminder about women's fidelity or infidelity. It is also a reminder of society. How have you treated her? We always see the other side. We don't want to see when the onus is also on us. So we just can't point for, when you're talking about five, the Panchakanyas have five different stories. The Ahilya,
Yes.
why
Yes.
does it start with an Ahilya? Because Ahilya is the paradox of a devoted, faithful wife, in contrast, she being an unfaithful wife. So that paradox sort of conjoins, sort of melts down actually when she becomes a Pankanchar, and I think it is all completely through her efforts. Because she realizes it, and that is what is actually say that you are accountable for what you are doing, and I think that's what Ahilya eventually does.
Any aspect, any area which I have not, covered, not asked, from your novel, from your this particular character, right? That you would
From
like to tell to the
Ahilya,
reader. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Which I have not
about
asked.
Ahilya.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know. I think I got a total analysis of Ahilya. Poor, I think you shared. No, I think we have asked quite a bit, but no, I would like to say. I think I think if people have not read the book, please do read the book, and you come to your own conclusion. You make your.
So, is
But
this
yes,
book
I think the
available
whole
on Amazon?
idea, the whole idea was to make a person really think and retrospect rather than judge and be moralistic about it. I think
So, is this
she is the biggest example of patriarchy. Honestly, Ahilya, the biggest example of hypocrisy, and the biggest example of paradox. So I think see the beauty of the paradox, who she was, how what she became, and who she eventually. When you say she's a Panchkanja, see the entire pain and suffering, the depth of her despair, her vulnerability, and I think that is also the story of Ahilya. I think that is the other side of Ahilya which needs to be seen.
right? Uh, from last 2 days, we have lost two veteran actors of Bollywood, Irfan Khan and Rishi Ji. So, any memory as a journalist that you have?
No,
Uh,
unfortunately, I did not meet either of them. Uh, though
but
mm, I remember I met him at, I just saw him at a hotel. Uh, there was a party and I saw him there. That's about it. But I have not gone and talked to either of them, so I would not say. But yes, I'm a fan. I'm a huge fan of both of them for different reasons. Because I think we grew up with Rishi Kapoor's movies, right from Khel Khel Me to. That's what I mean. That's what I mean. He really was he got all the zest and the zing and the women in all his movies. And I think, I mean, the best music. I mean, you see his movies, his songs, all the songs which you have, most of them are Rishi Kapoor songs. So he brought dance and glamour. Typical, I think it's a sort of almost he was carrying forward the Shami Kapoor heritage of song and dance. And Irfan, of course, I think Irfan, this whole thing of uh, absolutely powerful actor, and it's tragic. It's so sad that we lost them so early, and we could have. I mean, it's really rare. I mean,
So
just
you have
too
already
bad. I
written
mean,
six.
it's such a shock.
So you have already written six book on Indian mythology. Any upcoming book
Yeah,
that you
I'm in
are?
the midst of another. I'm on the seventh one, and let's see. I hope it comes out this year or next year, whatever. But yes, I'm done. I'm almost done with that book.
Okay. Now the final question from my end. We every time calling about and talking about and presenting and demonstrating about women empowerment in India, right? So women
Hmm.
empowerment is already there in our country. There's no need to give so much of the demonstration and presentation and everything. The only thing is that you have to collect the perspective what the women are doing, and tell the story to the rest of the world and give the positivity. Now, in the nutshell, what do you see the women empowerment term these days, interlinked to every profession, every job, or every house? So how do you see this women empowerment word these days in present context?
I just used it, I think, half an hour ago. I used it half an hour ago when I said, when I was talking about sisterhood. I think we dismiss it too lightly, and sadly, like feminism, it has become a cliche. No, I think it is definitely necessary, because women need to be empowered. They need to, and the empowerment, if it's sort of become a tired, jaded word. Uh, I think I don't mind the tired, jaded word. Of course, I'll say it over and over and over again, because yes, you empower a woman through an awareness, because you have to treat a woman not as a woman but as an individual, as a person, I think. And that is really not done in our society, not done in our families, not even done in our workplace. And I think the empowerment will come, it is going to come, and there are different ways of it. So as I said half an hour ago, in Ramayana it came through a sisterhood. Sisterhood is that one woman helps the other, one woman supports the other. Because I definitely do not agree with that line that women are women's worst enemies. That again, I think, is an extremely convenient line handed down to us. But I think a woman can be a woman's best friend. She's her best support. She's a lifeline. She's, after all, a girl is a mother's daughter. I mean, come off it. I mean, women are. You cannot dismiss. And I think women have been given a role in from through centuries. I mean, why are we so contemptuous and dismissive about a word called empowerment? If if anyone is saying, fine, let them say it, but do it also. I mean, the whole thing is not about talking about empowerment, doing it right from home. Not
Okay. Okay. One last technical question. If anybody
I
would
think
like to
there's a
pursue,
glitch again. I can't see you.
uh, now I'm visible, audible. My voice is
Hello.
audible to you.
I
Yeah.
can't see you. I can't.
Hello. Am I audible?
I can't hear. I can't hear at all. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes. I can hear you.
I think we can.
No. No. We have not ended. It's program is already going on. Program is live. One
I'm
last technique.
sorry, Dr. Bhagat. I can't hear you at all.
Maybe some technical problem is going at
I
our
think
end.
it's very abrupt, but I think we'll have to end it because I can't hear. And
Okay.
I
Thank you
hope,
so
anyway, I
much.
think let me just say I think that was the last question. Let me thank everyone. Thank you, Dr. Bhagat. Thank you, Ahmedabad Book Club. I hope I answered your question well. I hope you like my books. And I really appreciate the questions which have come up, because I think I've never analyzed Ahilya as much as I analyzed with you all right now. And thank you again. And yes, these are trying times, and I think the best part is that I really think, as a thing, I think after the end of it, we will definitely be braver, wiser people. Bye. Thank
Thank,
you.
thank,
And
thank you so much for joining in the program. It's privilege to all of us, all the Ahmedabad Book Club reader and the viewers and the whole reading community that you spared your time and joined us and shared about this mythological character. Thank you so much. We are winding up here.